There we go. That should do it. I think you should probably be able to hear me now. Yes? Test, test. Ice, ice, icicle. Pop, pop, popsicle. Test, test, testing. One, two, three. Am I coming through? Hooray! What is it's Wednesday, my dudes? What is that? Why did I also want to say that before Farmhouse said it? Is a meme? Oh. Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I think I am remembering it now. Oh, is it a little warm in here? What's the temperature at in my house right now? Let me ask my phone what the temperature is at in my house right now. It says 21 degrees. I'm gonna turn that down a little. I also think I'm getting some heat from the dishwasher, which is going right now. So, yes, there will probably be a magic dishwasher noise going off at some point during tonight's stream. Oh, I detect a puppy. Yeah, you. Yeah, I detect you. I'm gonna shift. What? Oh no, he ran away. Shift this out of the way to make his bed slightly less obscured. Oopsie daisy. Just moving a thing to. Oh, now that's whatever. Peppers. Yeah, he ran away when I got up because he thought I was going to the couch. I think. How's everyone's week going? I feel like I've got Dracula hair, not the weird white poofy thing. The version that's Dracula, right? And Bram Stoker or something like that. The like, I don't know. It's very out to the sides. The Gary Oldman one, yeah. What Farmhouse is saying. I don't know why it's so. There's a puppy hair in my hair. I may or may not have been rubbing my face on the puppy today. So it's Wednesday. How's everybody doing? I went to visit some friends over the weekend, which was good, but I think we were all very tired, so it was a little subdued. Sharky say mixed bag week. Pretty much fine. Mister is missing the stream. Oh no, he's away at a meeting. Ugh. What? No, that's not acceptable. He should have told whoever this meeting was with that he couldn't make it because he has prior commitments. Oh, I would feel terrible if anybody ever actually did that. Please don't do that. Please don't put off any real world activities to come and listen to me read a book. That's a very bad idea. He was kind of feeling that before he left, too. Oh. I mean, I don't know. If you have fun and you need to relax, it could be that, right? Relaxing is good. But mm, we have had some strata related things here. Our strata, there's been this whole issue basically since we moved in where some of the units in our strata complex need to get their decks replaced because they are in unsafe condition, and that's the strata's responsibility. And more recently, the strata has decided that they want to replace every single deck altogether, which is quite an expensive undertaking. Um, so they are. We had a vote yesterday to do an emergency levy so that everyone can pay for their deck replacements, which is not going to be cheap. Um, I guess there's no reason for me to not discuss real world numbers, but in Canadian dollars, they're starting at a minimum of $27,000 per unit to replace these decks, and some of the bigger units that have like larger decks are going to be more than that, I think. Um, so yeah, I feel real bad for some of the people in the strata that are like retirees or, families with just one working parent sort of thing or whatever, or really like anybody that just doesn't have a fluid, like a liquid $27,000 to throw out on a deck. Um, so, like, I don't know, that's not a small amount of money. That could be a problem for anybody. Um, but it also kind of comes in line with Farmos and I are thinking we are committing to selling our house here and moving to somewhere where we can get more of like a detached home because we're in a townhouse and we share a wall with another unit, and then we're in a strata, so it's like a little strata neighborhood. And we've got a little backyard, but behind, like, there's a fence and then the highway, and so it's always noisy here. Um, so we want to move somewhere where it's a little quieter, because we like it's noisy enough in our backyard that we don't even like going into our backyard. Like we don't do barbecues and things like that because it's too noisy. We don't like go and sit and read in the backyard because it's too noisy. Um, so we are we're probably gonna try and sell our house pretty short order, over the next couple of months, and then we'll see what we're gonna probably sell, move out to somewhere temporary, and then look at buying. Um, so there'll probably be a period somewhere between June to July where I've got a more temporary setup for the reading stream. You know, get my computer set up in a temporary situation. Hopefully somewhere with stable internet. Um, yeah, that's kind of our plan. And like realistically, there's going to be some stress involved there, but it's all positive movement, I hope. You know, we're in a good situation here right now. Like we like our house. Our house isn't bad. We just want to move to somewhere that we are more happy with our living situation. We have definitely lived in much worse places than we do now. Yeah, I think we've talked about our plan a little before. We're kind of looking at more towards like the Maple Ridge or Langley side of things. So, because we're in Richmond right now. So, we're looking towards that direction as somewhere that we can hopefully get maybe a little bit of a bigger house, more of a backyard, and more quiet. I think are our three desires from this move. Barno says somewhere more halfway between family and friends. Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of what we've been thinking about a lot over this past week. That's been sort of present on our minds. Farmhouse says, bigger yard for puppy. And for us. And for us. Sharky say, I sure notice when not driving up to Chilliwack a few times a month that it really is a long drive. Yeah, we go out that way quite regularly because Farmhouse's parents are out that way, my parents are out that way, and a bunch of our friends are out that way too. Or at least, some of our friends that we visit more regularly are in that direction. So that leaves us with frequent drives in that sort of out to Chilliwack. And an acceptable amount of time for that drive is an hour and a half in one direction. So that basically means every time we go out there and come back, it's 3 hours of driving. And that's if there isn't a pile of traffic, which can, add to that time. Sometimes maybe it's a little less than that. Sometimes it's a little less than an hour and a half, but that's pretty uncommon. So, frequent 3-hour drives. And it's not even like, the scenery's pretty repetitive. It's not even a fun drive. Just highway driving, right? So it's not like I kind of turn my brain off for most of it, Anything that's not required for, being safe on the road basically goes into stasis for that drive. Should you say a 3-hour tour even? Yeah, lots of them. So cutting down on that would be good. And I've been playing some games. I've been playing Rune Factory 4, and Farmhouse has been playing Rune Factory 5. I finished that Ayuden Chronicle Rising game that I think I mentioned previously. It was a pretty short game. It didn't take me more than a couple of days to 100% it, but it cost me like $10 or something like that because I got it as part of a Kickstarter thing, and so there was like a half-price deal. It set up the world of the Ayuden Chronicle world, and provided some information about what it's like. Yeah, Farmhouse has been playing Rune Factory 5. Which the Rune Factory games, if you're not familiar with them, are kind of like fantasy Harvest Moon mixed with more like going out and fighting monsters. So like you've got a field and like a farm that you can do some building on. You can build some barns because you can befriend monsters, and then depending on those, you get some materials from those. Some of the monsters are like cows or chickens, but so you can get milk and eggs and wool and honey and whatever from these different monsters. And then you've got a farm that you grow crops on, and a town that you do tasks for the different people in the town. And the people all have pretty distinct personalities and things, and you can romance with some of them and potentially get married and have a kid. If that's what you want to do. Although it's kind of a big part of the game, going through the increasing affection levels with people and stuff. And then you go out and fight monsters and go through dungeons, and there's bosses and challenges and things like that. So it's a little more actiony than a Harvest Moon game. Sharky say, sounds cute. Played Harvest Moon back in the SNES days and liked how cute it was, but found it a bit aimless. Well, I want to say I forget whether the Super Nintendo or the Game Boy Harvest Moon was the first one. One of those two was the first, and there's been many iterations since then. More recently, you've played Stardew Valley, right? I feel like we've talked about Stardew Valley. If you haven't, that's, I think, kind of a modern standard. That's sort of the, no? Oh. That's the like really. It started off as an indie game and it's gotten real big, and very popular. Stardew Valley, um, and it's very cutesy, pixelated style, um, but much beloved. Um, these days, if you wanted to play specifically a Harvest Moon game, you don't actually want to buy Harvest Moon because the Harvest Moon games lately have been terrible because of the companies in charge of them and things like that. But the original developers have gone off and been making games called Friends. What's it called? Olive something? Um, Pioneer. I know there's like Friends of Pioneer Town or something, but I forget the actual. Um, Story of Seasons? Yeah, Story of Seasons, Farmhouse says. Story of Seasons is, I think, more of like the original Harvest Moon developers. Um, and they're like basically remaking some of the old Harvest Moon games and releasing them under a different name, which is kind of funny that they're able to get away with that. Um, but yeah, it's fun. Just it. I understand the aimless part of it because there's definitely like a you need to kind of create your own goals a lot of the time. Rune Factory is a little bit less like that because there is a story that you follow, um, but there's no time limit on it. There's nothing pushing you to go and do it other than getting the occasional reminder. So you can do almost everything at kind of your own pace and take as long as you need to, which is both good and in a certain way I could see it being kind of bad if you need more motivation than that, right? Like if you need something pushing you through. Um, but there's nothing telling you really, like other than maybe some side quests to grow certain crops or, really do anything. So you kind of need to like set your own goals a lot of the time. Sharky say kind of like how Two Point Hospital is the spiritual successor to Theme Hospital. I feel like there's a lot of that lately or recently. And by recently, I mean it's kind of hard to pin down the timeline, but where like you had a great game, but that great game is owned by some company that doesn't really care that much. And so people who really liked that game and want more of it feel kind of betrayed or whatever when the company either doesn't make more of it or they take it in an awful like just churning out games to make money kind of direction, and they don't it's not like the earlier games are better than the more recent ones, which is really sad because that's that Iuden Chronicles game I was talking about. There was a original PlayStation series called Suikoden. There was Suikoden 1 and 2, and then it kept going. I think I don't even know how many there were in the end, at least five. um, but that intellectual property was owned by, I think, Konami, I believe. I can confirm that easily enough. Yeah, Konami. Um, and Konami, over the past decade or so, basically said that they don't think there's really much money made in sort of traditional video games, and they're almost exclusively making like mobile casino games, slot machines, and things like that, poker games, mahjong, whatever. But Konami owns a lot of like really popular old video game series. Suikoden, Metal Gear Solid, Silent Hill. And so they basically have just stuck all of these like properties into a vault, and like when they do make them, they don't really try very hard, it seems like, but more often they're just not making them. And that's kind of sad. And so with the Ayuden Chronicle example, the original creators, a bunch of them, like the original story design, art design, sound design, I think, have all teamed up and are making, instead of Suikoden, they're making this Eiyuden Chronicles game, which is sort of a spiritual successor. And you're saying 2-Point Hospital sounds like it's pretty similar. Theme Hospital was originally for the Windows 95 era. It's definitely a familiar name. I don't think, like, I've played similar games in that I've played, I don't know, Roller Coaster Tycoon, and I think I've played, like, Zoo Tycoon. I think a lot of those Tycoon games are kind of a similar idea, right? Where you're building a particular whatever the theme of the game is, and sometimes there's stages where they want you to do particular things. I've definitely seen the like cover art and things for Theme Hospital or 2-Point, whatever the current one is. 2-Point, I think you said. Yeah. In fact, because I've got Amazon Prime, and frequently they'll have like Prime gaming deals, and right now there is a 2-Point Hospital Bone Monster bundle that you can get for the next 12 days if you've got Amazon Prime. I don't know what the heck that is. It looks like you get some in-game content. It looks like a T-Rex statue. It looks like it's supposed to be like a centurion or something, and some kind of weird TV. Sharky say it functions like those sim build games, but Theme Hospital is extremely silly and irreverent. My favorite disease from it is bloaty head. I've got for tabletop games, or Dungeons and Dragons specifically, you frequently, like, running those games, you'll have a screen, the like GM screen, Game Master screen, whatever, right, which is just something to hide your papers and dice and stuff from the players. I'm sure you know what it is. And a while back there was, I think, a Kickstarter for a Penny Arcade one, because Penny Arcade's got this sort of ongoing D&D game thing called Acquisitions Incorporated, which is where your adventuring party is sort of part of a corporation, and it's very goofy, whatever, right? Farmhouse says sounds like a bit like the Operation board game, and the Sharkies agree. It feels like that. Anyways, so I backed. They came out with an Acquisitions Incorporated, like, official D&D book, and I backed that, and it came with a GM screen, and there's a list of status effects on that, and some of them are a little sweary, but there's, I don't know, like, one of the status effects is spice rubbed. Like, or I'm trying to think of some of them that don't involve excessive language. But they're quite funny. They're completely useless, and, like, not at all. There's no stats or numbers involved with the status effects, but I'll be right back. I'm gonna grab this screen. I found it. And by found it, I mean I knew where it was. Here's the screen. The side that you would be seeing as a player. Some cool artwork on there. Alright, let's see. I think. Yeah, alright. I'll just show this side of it. Some of the status effects over here. You could be obliterated, Obliterated creatures are totally dead for real. Get out of this. Get out of here with this raised dead BS. Throw your character sheet in the garbage, Gary. You're obliterated. Cool. I like how the cool guy's got a fidget spinner and a skateboard and a guitar and shades. Cool creatures are always down for whatever. Cool creatures probably wear leather or something else cool. Cool creatures will help you move on their day off. Did I not say the skateboard? I said skateboard. Yeah. Poxy creatures often consort with ne'er-do-wells and or rapscallions. That's half of the status effects that are on here. Just cover up this one, but turned into teeth. Self-explanatory. What do you even want from me? Your teeth forever now. That's what's up. Beef? Oh, peckish. Yeah, peckish creatures don't want beef. There's all kinds of tables on here. Flask contents table. If you roll, let's say you roll a 4 on the flask contents table, that flask contains liquid thirst. There's an end table for, if you roll a 6, then you've got a rustic end table. A 3, not the best end table. If you roll an 8, it's actually just a goblin. Yeah. Bad treasure table. Flame type for what kind of flame it is. If you roll a 7, it's flame plus. A table for dungeon scents. Yeah. All right. Instead of reading a GM screen, I don't know, kind of got a little sidetracked there. Fluff Knight, oh hi! How's it going? How's your exercising for charity been going? I saw that was happening, but I think when I saw it, it was like 1 a.m. or something like that, so I was kind of on my way to dreamland. You're actually about to stream. Me too! We're reading Wyrd Sisters by Sir Terry Pratchett. Well, thank you for hopping by. Have you ever read any Sir Terry? This is our second one of his books we've read. The other one was Guards. And then we've read a few other books as well. You haven't read any? Well, you should come back sometime and join us and find out if it's for you. Spoiler warning, it's for you. Definitely, you would like them. Here's Anthony. Oh boy. I have read many as well. I enjoyed them when I was younger. I now have opinions about how terrible a writer he is. Because, oof, there is some problematic material in those books. There, if you ever go back and, like, I don't know when the last time you've read them was. Yeah, there is some female characters being treated very grossly, especially female characters that are too young for that kind of treatment. Sharky, you say it's funny how the more one reads, the more one can smell stinky writing from a mile away. I think that I really enjoyed those books when I was younger. You know, when I was in my early teens, things like that, right? And there was a lot of things that I was less educated about then. You know, jokes that I would have thought were funny then that I would not think are funny now. Bucksperson Bro says, ew, yeah. Yeah, Piers, and it's interesting because also, when I kind of noticed certain themes about Piers Anthony, I think I went and looked up whether, I was remembering these things correctly. And it turns out that there are other series of books that he's written that are way worse, where he wasn't writing for children specifically, and so he felt more comfortable writing really disgusting things. Um, yeah, some of it's real bad. Like, maybe he should go to jail bad. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take shots at you specifically. It's like I said, the Xanth. I assume because you said you've read Piers Anthony books. I assume you were thinking the Xanth books. Although I suppose there could have been other series. Like there's the Incarnations of Immortality, which were slightly more adult without being too adult. It's the puns, yeah. And I mean that's the thing. Like that series, while there are definitely problems with it, a lot of it is puns and weird magic and stuff, right? And so, like, I don't think that anybody who enjoyed those books should feel bad about it. I enjoyed those books. I do feel a little bad about it, but that's because of, you know, going back and reading some of them again. To like that, going back and reading them was to be like, let's see how bad they were. Yeah, pretty bad. Farmhouse read a ton of them when she was younger and didn't realize they were problematic. Yeah, I mean, when you're a kid, you shouldn't be noticing that stuff. I don't know. Books, Brews, and Booze looks at popular 80s movies now, and some of the themes are, yeah. Fluff Knight says, we all as an audience have grown. Hopefully. I think everyone in this chat is that way, yeah. Sharkies for sure knew that as parents watching some of the things we did as kids and go, yikes. And Farmhouse. I was thinking Blade Runner probably because we've talked about it. Though, like, I think a thing in 80s stuff is, like, a thing that came up frequently was, you know, the woman says no, but she means yes, or sort of thing, or she doesn't know what she wants. And then the guy gets pushy about it, and that's because he's a manly man. And so it's okay. And then she actually wants it, so it's all consensual. Yeah, it's real gross. But, I mean, like, I feel like it was also kind of a standard thing that happened in writing at the time. Books, Brews, and Booze is remembering a scene in Pretty in Pink when they took naked photos of the drunk girl who was passed out in the car. Wow. Gross. Pretty in Pink. Which one is that? The name is definitely familiar, but I don't 100% know whether I've seen it or not. Sharky's bringing up Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That, you know, to be fair, that movie kind of scared me as a kid. The Dip? Ugh. That freaked me out. They were straight up murdering cartoon characters in that movie. Anyways, I mean, feel free to continue talking about the films. What am I drinking? Oh, I think it's literally just iced tea. But I'm drinking out of my awesome Hobbit mug that Eric made for me. There's Bilbo's front door, his Hobbit hole. There's Smaug, one of the Tolkien sort of illustrations. And then we've got the front gate of the Lonely Mountain with the river coming out and smoke coming out and the tree that's not very healthy. I love this mug. This has become my stream mug. Brooks Person Booze says, still has trouble watching the scene where the villain's eyes go all crazy and he turns back into a toon. Yeah, because the eyeballs pop out of his head. Yeah, that scared me too. Hmm. Yeah, that whole scene. Who was that? That was Back to the Future. Christopher Lloyd. Yeah. I mean, great job in being a terrifying villain, but ugh, that his character, yeah, still gives me the creeps for sure. Anyways, in my copy of Wyrd Sisters, we are on page 140, near the bottom of 140. All right, well, good luck with the working out for charity, Fluff Knight, and thanks for stopping by. Um, I'll be going for another hour-ish, maybe a little longer than that, but I'll try and see. Actually, I haven't followed you yet. I'm going to do that right now. Or did I follow you? Maybe I did. Oh no, I'm already following you. Okay. So hopefully it will show me, yeah. If you're streaming when I'm done, then I will try and raid your way if you're still going. Oh, only 20 minutes or so. Okay, all right, I'm sorry. I probably won't be raiding you then because I'll still be reading. Sharky's saying, I think probably Christopher Lloyd, stars in a very weird half animation, half realistic video game from the 80s called Toonstruck. I don't think I've heard of that one. Okay, well, hopefully we'll see you in a bit. Yeah, so this last time we read on Friday was a little intense, wasn't it? Because we had the whole confrontation between Granny Weatherwax and the Duke. So that was, yeesh. I don't know. It's weird because usually Granny Weatherwax is very much in control. And so I feel like it feels wrong when someone gets the better of her. I think that's why it feels so rough to me in particular. What page are we on? I am on page 140 in my copy. Um, 140. And then the witches kind of had a bit where they were somewhat coerced into waving to the crowd with the Duke. And then as they left, they almost got run off the road by a wagon, which they don't seem to be fully aware, the witches, of this rumor campaign against them. The what's the word? Pamphlets. We were talking about it last time and I've forgotten the word again. Um, Starts with a P. Propaganda. Yeah, the propaganda campaign. Um, they have noticed that people don't have the respect for them, and I think our Sean told them some of the things that people are saying about them, but I don't think that they are fully aware that that's because the Duke is having those rumors spread intentionally. Sharky say, from what I've read so far, Granny is firmly in protagonist territory in a way that Rincewind of the Wizards isn't always. Um, I mean, she definitely sometimes is very rude to, say, Magrat and Nanny Og. And I feel like, sometimes she's in the wrong when she does those things, but protagonists can be in the wrong. Um, but, like, yeah, I'm not sure. But then Booksbrews and Brew says, with Granny, it's almost like when you see someone cry who doesn't normally cry, then you know things are bad. Yeah, yeah, agreed. Pharma says, Rincewind is more chaotic neutral. Chaotic neutral leaning towards chaotic good, right? Like, Rincewind knows what the right thing to do is, and if it won't get him killed, he'll try to do it. And if it will get him killed but he doesn't have any other choice, then he'll do it. Or if it might get him killed and he doesn't have any other choice. Sharky say, and it's sometimes written that the narrator is not necessarily supporting what he does. Hmm. Half brick in a sock. Pharma says he has a moral compass, but his chaos level frequently means that he's mostly just trying to survive. Yeah. Oop, bumped the camera, bumped the tripod. Anyways, so um, the last time we saw the witches, they said, well, Granny was good and furious after, getting tossed into a ditch because the wagon almost ran them down. And it sounds like she had decided to take action. Magrat said, what about this rule about not meddling? And Nanny said, the thing is, as you progress in the craft, you'll learn there's another rule. When you break rules, break 'em good and hard. And then the Duke, the Duchess, and the Fool had another conversation, which usually means bad news for the witches, even if the Fool isn't, wanting harm to them. The Fool also has loyalties to the Duke and can't help but give advice that will support the Duke, it feels like. Even if he thinks what the Duke is doing is wrong, he still tells him how to do it. And the most recent advice was that if you want to change history, you can do that with words, possibly through a play. If only we knew a certain group of players, a theater group. I wonder if they might somehow get involved in all this, especially when the Duchess said that, or the Duke, I guess. The Duke and the Duchess kind of together suggested that they need to find the best playwright. The only playwright we've met so far is with a certain group of theater folk. Curious. Booksbrews and Brews says, yeah. I wonder if somehow this is all going to tie together. I don't know. Could it? Could it come together somehow? Can anybody see the future in that way? It's not possible. And that's where we're at. Again, on my copy, page 140. So, Why don't we get into it? The storm was resting. It didn't want to be, but it was. It had spent a fortnight understudying a famous anticyclone over the Circle Sea, turning up every day, hanging around in the cold front, grateful for a chance to uproot the occasional tree or whirl a farmhouse to any available emerald city of its choice. Wow. But the big break in the weather had never come. Sharky say, it's been a few years since I've read this one, and at the tail end of the last session, I think you remembered the main thrust of what happens to get to the end. Yeah, it's funny how there'll be those like, oh, right, that's how this went. I remember a hazy outline at best. It's been quite a long time since I've read this one. Farmhouse is womp-womping over a break in the weather. It consoled itself with the thought that even the really great storms of the past, the great gale of 1789, for example, of Hurricane Zelda and her amazing raining frogs, had gone through this sort of thing at some stage in their career. It was just part of the great tradition of the weather. Besides, it had had a good stretch in the equivalent of pantomime down on the plains, bringing seasonal snow and terminal frostbite to millions. It just had to be philosophical. Philosophicable. There's an extra syllable for you. It just had to be philosophical about being back up here now with nothing much to do except wave the heather about. If weather was people, this storm would be filling in time wearing a cardboard hat in a hamburger hell. Currently, it was observing 3 figures moving slowly over the moor, converging with some determination on a bare patch where the standing stone stood, or usually stood, though just at the moment it wasn't visible. Books, Brews, and Booze enjoys my take on philosophicable. It seems like it's something that Granny would say. You know, don't get philosophicable on me. Or maybe Nobby. I could see Nobby saying philosophicable. Books, Brews, and Brews greeting favorite character. It, the storm, recognized them as old friends and connoisseurs, and conjured up a brief unseasonal roll of thunder as a form of greeting. This was totally ignored. "The bloody stone's gone," said Granny Weatherwax. "However many there is of it." Her face was pale. It might also have been drawn. If so, then it was by a very neurotic artist. She looked as though she meant business. Bad business. "Light the fire, Magrat," she said automatically. "I dare say we'll all feel better for a cup of tea," said Nanny Ogg, mouthing the words like a mantra. She fumbled in the recesses of her shawl. "With something in it," she added, producing a small bottle of Applejack. Oh, Nanny Ogg. "Alcohol is a deceiver and tarnishes the soul," said Magrat virtuously. "I never touch the stuff," said Granny Weatherwax. "We should keep a clear head, Githa." "Just a drop in your tea isn't drinking," said Nanny. "It's medicine. It's chilly old wind up here, sisters." "Very well," said Granny, but just a drop. They drank in silence. Eventually, Granny said, "Well, Magrat, you know all about the coven business. We might as well do it right. What do we do next?" Magrat hesitated. She wasn't up to suggesting dancing naked. "There's a song," she said, "in praise of the full moon." It ain't full, Granny pointed out. It's what's name? Bulging. "Gippus," said Nanny obligingly. "I think it's in praise of full moons in general," Magrat hazarded. "And then we have to raise our consciousness. It really ought to be full moon for that, I'm afraid. Moons are very important." Granny gave her a long, calculating look. "That's modern witchcraft for you, is it?" she said. "It's part of it, Granny. There's a lot more." Granny Weatherwax sighed. "Each to her own, I suppose. I'm blowed if I'll let a ball of shiny rock tell me what to do." "Yes, bugger all that," said Nanny. "Let's curse somebody." Sharky say, "I love Nanny Hog so much. A drop of Applejack in your tea and let's curse somebody." The fool crept cautiously along the nighttime corridors. He wasn't taking any chances either. Magrat had given him a graphic account of Gribo's general disposition, and the fool had borrowed a couple of gloves and a sort of metal wimple from the castle's store of hereditary chainmail. Books Persenbos says, Magrat gives a long, suffering sigh. Yeah. He reached the lumber room, lifted the latch cautiously, pushed the door, and then flung himself against the wall. The corridor became slightly darker as the more intense darkness inside the room spilled out and mingled with the rather lighter darkness already there. That's how that works. Apart from that, nothing. The number of spitting, enraged balls of murderous fur pouring through the door was 0. The fool relaxed and slipped inside. What a fool. Gribo dropped on his head. It had been a long day. The room did not offer the kind of full life that Gribo had come to expect and demand. The only point of interest had been the discovery, around mid-morning, of a colony of mice who had spent generations eating their way through a priceless tapestry history of Lancre and had just got as far as King Maroon, 709 to 745, who met a terrible fate, footnote, when they did, too. Footnote, involving a red-hot poker, a privy, 10 pounds of live eels, a 3-mile stretch of frozen river, a butt of wine, a couple of tulip bulbs, a number of poisoned eardrops, an oyster, and a large man with a mallet. King Maroon didn't make friends easily. Tulip bulbs. Has anyone heard of tulip mania? Apparently tulip bulbs, there was a period of time where tulip bulbs were quite the rage and maybe even seen as an investment opportunity. I hear cryptocurrency's crashing pretty hard right now. Sharky say, like Beanie Babies. Bookspurgeon was saying, in Holland, I think so, yes. Apparently there was a period of time when, like, there were some tulip bulbs that were selling for more than a house. End of footnote. He, Grebo, had sharpened his claws on a bust of Lanker's only royal vampire, Queen Grimnir the Impaler, 1514 to 1553, 1553 to 1557, 1557 to 1562, 1562 to 1567, and 1568 to 1573. I love that. That's great. Books, Brews, and Booze has come up with an Amazon link to, I believe, probably a book called Tulipomania, Coveted Extraordinary Passions Aroused. If I'm getting that from the link correctly. Sharkies once came across an antiques book from the late 90s when they predicted that some Beanie Babies would be like inflation and just keep increasing in value indefinitely. Did I mention that cryptocurrency is crashing pretty hard right now? I think I might have said something about that. It says choose your own fave bookstore, obviously. Just the first. Oh, yeah. Tulipomania. If you haven't heard it, there's a song by Phoenix called Listomania, which apparently was one of the earlier manias for music, pre like Beatles and things like that. Listomania. He, Grebo, had performed his morning ablutions on a portrait of an unknown monarch, which was beginning to dissolve. Now he was bored, and also angry. He raked his claws across the place where the fool's ears should have been, and was rewarded with nothing more than a metallic scraping noise. "Who's a good boy, den?" said the fool. "Wowza, wowza, whoosh." This intrigued Grebo. The only other person who had ever spoken to him like this was Nanny Og. Everyone else addressed him as, "Yar, get off out of it, ya bastard." Bastard. Yar, get off out of it, ya bastard. He leaned down very carefully, intrigued by the new experience. Wowza, wowza, whoosh. From the fool's point of view, an upside-down cat face lowered itself slowly into his field of vision, wearing an expression of evil-eyed interest. "Does oo want to go home, den?" said the fool hopefully. "Look, Mr. Door is open." Grebo increased his grip. He had found a friend. The fool shrugged, very carefully, turned, and walked back into the passage. He made his way down through the hall, out into the courtyard, around the side of the guard room, and out through the main gate, nodding carefully to the guards. "Man just went past with a cat on his head," one of them remarked, after a minute or two's reflection. "See who it was?" "The fool, I think." There was a thoughtful pause. The second guard shifted his grip on his halberd. "It's a rotten job," he said, "but I suppose someone's got to do it." Yeah, that's one of those what's the like emergency services? That's not quite the right thing. Like garbage disposal, one of those needs to get done. Essential services, thank you. Yeah, fool. Garbage disposal, waste collection in general, medical services. Fool. They're all essential. Fooling, says Farmos, yeah. Booksperson Boo says, poor Grebo. He needs more pets and love. Yeah, all you need is armor to deliver that. "We ain't going to curse anyone," said Granny firmly. "It hardly ever works if they don't know you've done it." I like the implication there that it does work if they know you've cursed them. "What you do is, you send him a doll of himself with pins in." "No, Githa." "All you have to do is get hold of some of his toenails," Nanny persisted enthusiastically. "No." "Or some of his hair, or anything. I've got some pins." "No." Cursing people is morally unsound and extremely bad for your karma, said Magrat. Starkey say psychosomatic curse? Yeah. "Well, I'm going to curse him anyway," said Nanny. "Under my breath, like. I could have caught my death in that dungeon for all he cared." "We ain't going to curse him," said Nanny. "We're going to replace him. What did you do with the old king?" "I left the rock on the kitchen table," said Nanny. "I couldn't stand it any more." Okay, so King Varence has not passed on or faded away. He's still in that rock. That answers that question. "I don't see why," said Magrat. "He seemed very pleasant. For a ghost." "Oh, he was all right. It was the others," said Nanny. "Others?" "Pray, carry a stone out of the palace so's I can haunt it, good mother," he says, said Nanny Og. "It's bloody boring in here, Mistress Og. Excuse my clatchian," he says. So of course I did. I reckon they was all listening. Oh, yes, they all thinks, "All aboard! Time for a bit of a holiday." I got nothing against ghosts, especially royal ghosts, she added loyally, but my cottage isn't the place for them. I mean, there's some woman in a chariot yelling her head off in the wash-house, I ask you. And there's a couple of little kiddies in the pantry, and men without heads all over the place, and someone screaming under the sink, and there's this little hairy man wandering around looking lost and everything. It's not right." I think that's the most talking Nanny Og's done at once. I like that these are basically all references to ghosts we've seen before. The little hairy man wandering around, I think, was the guy whose burial site the castle was built on top of. Just so long as he's not here, said Granny. We don't want any men around. He's a ghost, not a man, said Magrat. We don't have to go into details, Granny said icily. But you can't put the old king back on the throne. Oh, there's the magic dishwasher. Hope my whistling wasn't too piercing a sound, sorry. But you can't put the old king back on the throne, said Magrat. Ghosts can't rule. You'd never get the crown to stay on. It'd drop through. Yeah, that's the problem. We're going to replace him with his son, said Granny. Proper succession. Oh, we've been through all that, said Nanny dismissively. In about 15 years' time, perhaps, but... Tonight, said Granny. A child on the throne? He wouldn't last 5 minutes. Not a child, said Granny quietly. A grown man. Remember Alice Demirage? Aliss. There was silence. Then Nanny Ogg sat back. Bloody hell, she whispered. You ain't going to try that, are you? I mean to have a go. Bloody hell, said Nanny again, very quietly, and added, You've been thinking about this, have you? Yes. See here, Esme. I mean, Black Alice was one of the best. I mean, you're very good at, well, headology and thinking and that. I mean, Black Alice, well, she just upped and went at it. You saying I couldn't do it, are you? Excuse me, said Magrat. No, of course not, said Nanny, ignoring her. Right. Only, well, she was a hoyden of witches, like the king said. Hoyden. Doyen, said Granny, who had looked it up. Not hoyden. Excuse me, said Magrat, louder this time. Who was Black Alice? And, she added quickly, none of this exchanging meaningful glances and talking over my head. There's 3 witches in this coven, remember? She was before your time, said Nanny Ogg. Before mine, really. She lived over Scund way. Very powerful witch. If you listen to rumor, said Granny. She turned a pumpkin into a royal coach once, said Nanny. Showy, said Granny Weatherwax. That's no help to anyone, turning up at a ball smelling like a pie. And that business with the glass slipper. Dangerous to my mind. Just going for it. Just straight up. Let's think about every witch fairy tale we can remember and throw them into this book, shall we? Speaking of, but the biggest thing she ever did, said Nanny, ignoring the interruption, was to send a whole palace to sleep for 100 years until... She hesitated. Can't remember. Was there rose bushes involved? Or was it spinning wheels in this one? I think some princess had to finger... No, there was a prince. That was it. We had this conversation about, was it rose bushes or a spinning wheel? Finger a prince? Said Magrat uneasily. That reminds me of a certain Animaniacs joke.
No, he had to kiss her. Very romantic, Black Alice was. There was always a bit of romance in her spells. She liked nothing better than girl meets frog.
Why did they call her Black Alice?
Fingernails, said Granny.
And teeth, said Nanny Og. Spokesperson Bose knows the Animaniacs joke.
She had a sweet tooth. Lived in a real gingerbread cottage.
There's another one.
Couple of kids shoved her in her own oven in the end. Shocking.
How many witches crammed together is Black Alice here? I count at least 3, although technically the pumpkin bit should have been a fairy godmother, not a witch, I guess, right? Farmo says all of them. And you're going to send the castle to sleep? Said Magrat.
She never sent the castle to sleep, said Granny. That's just an old wives' tale, she added, glaring at Nanny. She just stirred up time a little. It's not as hard as people think. Everyone does it all the time. It's like rubber is time. You can stretch it to suit yourself.
I feel like my granny voice strayed a little there. Whatever. Magrat was about to say, "That's not right. Time is time. Every second lasts a second. That's what it's for. That's its job." And then she recalled weeks that had flown past, and afternoons that had lasted forever. Some minutes had lasted hours. Some hours had gone past so quickly she hadn't been aware they'd gone past at all. "But that's just people's perception," she said. "Isn't it?"
"Oh, yes," said Granny. "Of course it is. It all is. What difference does that make?"
100 years would be over-egging it, mind, said Nanny.
"I reckon 15'd be a nice round number," said Granny. "That means the lad will be 18 at the finish. We just do the spell, go and fetch him. He can manifest his destiny, and everything will be nice and neat."
It's kind of a weird concept. She's proposing that they just have a 15-year time skip. Right? Like, only really. Like, 15 years passed and nothing happened. Imagine if I said that and then that happened. It was now 15 years later. It was, what, like 2037. I was like, 15 years passed, nothing much happened. 2037, boom, we're all there. That'd be, that's kind of what Granny's proposing. Like, the time in between passed, it was just uneventful and we didn't really notice. I don't know about that. Magrat didn't comment on this because it had occurred to her that destinies sounded easy enough when you talked about them, but were never very bankable where real human beings were concerned. But Nanny Og sat back and tipped another generous measure of apple brandy in her tea.
"Could work out nice," she said. "A bit of peace and quiet for 15 years. If I recall the spell, after you say it, you have to fly around the castle before cock crow.
I wasn't thinking about that, said Granny. It wouldn't be right. Felmet would still be king all that time. The kingdom would still get sick. No, what I was thinking of doing was moving the whole kingdom. She beamed at them.
The whole of Lanka, said Nanny.
Yes.
15 years into the future?
Yes.
Nanny looked at Granny's broomstick. Naturally. It was a well-made thing, built to last, apart from the occasional starting problem. But there were limits.
You'll never do it, she said. Not around the whole kingdom in that. That's all the way up to Powder Knife, and down to Drumlin's Fell. You just couldn't carry enough magic.
I've thought of that, said Granny.
She beamed again. It was terrifying. She explained the plan. It was dreadful. A minute later, the moor was deserted as the witches hurried to their tasks. It was silent for a while, apart from the squeak of bats and the occasional rustle of the wind in the heather. Then there was some bubbling from the nearby peat bog. Very slowly, crowned with a thicket of sphagnum moss, the standing stone surfaced and peered around the landscape with an air of deep distrust. There you go for all you Standing Stone fans out there. It was hiding in the bog. Farmouse says, yay! I'm very amused by the... Was there rose bushes involved, or was it spinning wheels in that one? Bit. Just because I'm pretty sure within the past couple of weeks we had that exact conversation. Finger a prince. Books, Brews, and Booze stands for Standing Stone. That's what Stan can be short for now. So antisocial that it's willing to hide under a bog. And then when they leave, it just... Are they gone? Oh boy. All right. Grebo was really enjoying this. At first he thought his new friend was taking him to Magrat's cottage. But for some reason, he'd wandered off the path in the dark and was taking a stroll in the forest. In one of the more interesting bits, Grebo had always felt. It was a hummocky area, rich in hidden potholes and small, intense swamps, full of mist even in fine weather. Grebo often came up here on the off chance that a wolf was lying up for the day. Oh, I thought cats could find their own way home, the fool muttered. He cursed himself under his breath. It would have been easy to take this wretched creature back to Nanny Ogg's house, which was only a few streets away, almost in the shadow of the castle. But then he'd had the idea of delivering it to Magrat. It would impress her, he thought. Witches were very keen on cats. Common knowledge, that. And then she'd be bound to ask him in, for a cup of tea or something.
He put his foot in another water-filled hole. Something wriggled underneath it. The fool groaned and stepped back onto a tumescent mushroom. "Look, cat," he said. "You've got to come down, right? And then you can find your way home, and I'll follow you. Cats are good at seeing in the dark and finding their own way home," he added hopefully. The fool is lost. He reached up. Grebo sank his claws into his arm as a friendly warning, and found to his surprise that this had no effect on chainmail.
I feel like that might not necessarily be true. Chainmail is basically just a whole lot of little holes, and claws could fit through that. But under chainmail, you would frequently wear some kind of padded under armor sort of thing, right? Like some, yeah, basically to keep it from chafing all over you and whatnot, and give yourself a little bit of protection from the bludgeoning force. A gambeson, yes. Sharky say my cat did that to me the other day too. Or maybe the chainmail stops the claws from going in as far. Yeah, I mean, between the chainmail and the gambeson, you would probably be pretty protected. Assuming that the fool is wearing a gambeson.
"There's a good cat," said the fool, and lowered him to the ground. "Go on, find your way home. Any home will do." Grebo's grin gradually faded, until there was nothing left but the cat. The opposite of the Cheshire cat? This was nearly as spooky as the opposite way around. Grebo's grin gradually faded until there was nothing left but the cat. This was nearly as spooky as the opposite way around. Wow. So many references over the past few pages. He stretched and yawned to hide his embarrassment. Being called a good cat in the middle of one of his favorite stalking grounds wasn't going to do anything for his prowl credibility. He disappeared into the undergrowth. The fool peered into the gloom. It dawned on him that while he liked forests, he liked them at one remove, as it were. It was nice to know that they were there, but the forests of the mind were not quite the same as real forests that, for example, you got lost in. They had more mighty oaks and fewer brambles. They also tended to be viewed in daylight, and the trees didn't have malevolent faces and long scratchy branches. The trees of the imagination were proud giants of the forest. Most of the trees here appeared to be vegetable gnomes, mere trellises for fungi and ivy. The fool was vaguely aware that you could tell which direction the hub lay by seeing which side of the trees the moss grew on. A quick inspection of the nearby trunks indicated that, in defiance of all normal geography, the hub lay everywhere. Grebo had vanished. The fool sighed, removed his chainmail protection, and tinkled gently through the night in search of high ground. High ground seemed like a good idea. The ground he was on at the moment appeared to be trembling. He was sure it shouldn't do that. Magrat hovered on her broomstick several 100 feet above the turnwise borders of Lancre, looking down on a sea of mist through which the occasional treetop poked like a seaweed-covered rock at high tide. A bulging moon floated above her, probably gibbous again. Even a decent thin crescent would have been better, she felt. More appropriate. She shivered and wondered where Granny Weatherwax was at this moment. The old witch's broomstick was known and feared throughout the skies of Lancre. Granny had been introduced to flying quite late in life, and after some initial suspicion, had taken to it like a blue bottle to an ancient fish head. A blue bottle is a type of fly. A problem, however, was that Granny saw every flight simply as a straight line from A to B, and was unable to get alongside the idea that other users of the air might have any rights whatsoever. The flight migration patterns of an entire continent had been changed because of that simple fact. High-speed evolution among local birds had developed a generation that flew on their backs, so that they could keep a watchful eye on the skies. Granny's implicit belief that everything should get out of her way extended to other witches, very tall trees, and, on occasion, mountains. Granny had also browbeaten the dwarfs who lived under the mountains, and in fear of their lives, into speeding the thing up. Many an egg had been laid in mid-air by unsuspecting fowls who had suddenly glimpsed Granny bearing down on them, scowling over the top of her broomstick. "Oh dear," thought Magrat. "I hope she hasn't happened to someone." It's an interesting phrase. A midnight breeze turned her gently around in the air, like an unsupported weathercock. She shivered and squinted at the moonlit mountains, the high ram-tops, whose freezing crags and ice-green chasms acknowledged no king or cartographer. Only on the rimward side was Lancre open to the world. The rest of its borders looked as jagged as a wolf's mouth, and far more impassable. From up here, it was possible to see the whole kingdom. There was a ripping noise in the sky above her, a blast of wind that spun her around again, and a Doppler-distorted cry of, "Stop daydreaming, girl!" She gripped the bristles with her knees and urged the stick upward. It took several minutes to catch up with Granny, who was lying almost full length along her broomstick to reduce wind resistance. Dark treetops roared far below them as Magrat came alongside. Granny turned to her, holding her hat on with one hand. "Not before time," she snapped. "I don't reckon this one's got more'n a few minutes of flight left. Come on, get a move on." She reached out a hand. So did Magrat. Unsteadily, the broomsticks bucking and dipping in one another's slipstream, they touched fingertips. Magrat's arm tingled as the power flowed up it. Footnote. Possibly the first attempt at the in-flight refueling of a broomstick. Granny's broomstick jerked forward. "Leave me a bit," shouted Magrat. "I've got to get down." "Shouldn't be difficult," screamed Granny, above the noise of the wind. "I mean, get down safely." "You're a witch, ain't you? By the way, did you bring the cocoa? I'm freezing up here." Magrat nodded desperately, and with her spare hand
passed up a straw bag.
"Right," said Granny. "Well done. See you at Lanker Bridge."
She uncurled her fingers. Magrat whirled away in the buffeting wind, clinging tightly to a broomstick which now, she feared, had about as much buoyancy as a bit of firewood. It certainly wasn't capable of sustaining a full-grown woman against the beckoning fingers of gravity. As she plunged down toward the forest roof in a long, shallow dive, she reflected that there was possibly something complimentary in the way Granny Weatherwax resolutely refused to consider other people's problems. It implied that, in her considerable opinion, they were quite capable of sorting them out by themselves. Some kind of change spell was probably in order. Magrat concentrated. Well, that seemed to work. Nothing in the sight of mortal man had in fact changed. What Magrat had achieved was a mere adjustment of the mental processes, from a bewildered and slightly frightened woman gliding inexorably toward the inhospitable ground, to a clear-headed, optimistic, and positive-thinking woman who had really got it together, was taking full responsibility for her own life, and in general knew where she was coming from, although, unfortunately, where she was heading had not changed in any way. But she felt a lot better about it. She dug her heels in and forced the broomstick to yield the last dregs of its power in a brief burst, sending it skimming erratically a few feet from the trees. As it sagged again and started to plow a furrow among the midnight leaves, she tensed herself, praying to whatever gods of the forest might be listening that she would land on something soft and let go. There are 3,000 known major gods on the disk, and research theologians, I'm just going to keep repeating theologians. Last time. Discover more every week. Apart from the minor gods of rock, tree, and water, Sharky say theologians, theologian. Research theologians. Spokesperson Booze suggests theologians. Sharkies think it's Jans. Spokesperson Booze thinks it's Gians. I'm more inclined to lean toward Gians. Theologians. There, that was approximately right. Group effort. Way to go, everybody. Chucky say, with my degree, I'm technically one. I say Jans. Okay. Theologians. For Ms. Sharky. I'm sorry. Professor Sharky? Theologian Sharky. I don't know why. It's probably too much repetition, but it's sounding less and less like a word over here. I hate it when that happens. Apart from the minor gods of rock, tree, and water,
There are two that haunt the round tops. Hokey, we've heard them mention this before, half a man, half a goat, and entirely a bad practical joker, who was banished from Dunmanifeston for pulling the old exploding mistletoe joke on blind Io, chief of all the gods, and also Herne, Herne, Herne the hunted, the terrified and apprehensive deity of all small furry creatures whose destiny it is to end their lives as a brief, crunchy squeak.
Books Persian Brews says, I wish people would comment on pronunciations when I'm on stream. People just let me stumble. I feel like that's one of our most popular pastimes here on this stream, is trying to get me to say it right. Chucky say it's a BA, so not that fancy. Farmo says, why not theologians? Just for fun. Chucky say, depends on the accent. I think I've heard it close to that. Theologians. I feel like I'm speaking a different language now. Either could have been candidates for the small miracle which then occurred. For, in a forest full of cold rocks, jagged stumps, and thorn bushes, Magrat landed on something soft. I wonder what Magrat might have landed on, huh? What could be out in the forest for Magrat to land on that would be on theme? Pharma says, or perhaps thologenes. Granny, meanwhile, was accelerating toward the mountains on the second leg of the journey. She consumed the regrettably tepid cocoa and, with proper environmental consideration, dropped the bottle as she passed over an upland lake. That's proper environmental consideration, huh? It turned out that Magrat's idea of sustaining food was 2 rounds of egg and crust sandwiches with the crusts cut off, and, Granny noticed before the wind whipped it away, a small piece of parsley placed with consideration and care on top of each one. Granny regarded them for some time. Then she ate them. A chasm loomed, still choked with winter snow. Like a tiny spark in the darkness, a dot of light against the hugeness of the round tops, Granny tackled the maze of the mountains. Back in the forest, Magrat sat up and absent-mindedly pulled a twig from her hair. A few yards away, the broomstick dropped through the trees, showering leaves. A groan and a small, half-hearted tinkle caused her to peel. I froze up there. Peer. Fluff Knight is back and listening. Hi. I'm starting to stumble over my words here. How was the exercise? An indistinct... A groan and a small half-hearted tinkle caused her to peer into the gloom. An indistinct figure was on its hands and knees, searching for something. Did I land on you? Said Magrat. Someone did, said the fool. Surprise, it's the fool. Fluff Knight says, it was longer than expected. Made a mistake and chose hard mode. Oh dear. Are you going to feel that tomorrow? They crawled nearer to one another. You? You! What are you doing here? Marry,
I was walking along the ground, said the fool. A lot of people do, you know. I mean, it's been done before. It's not original. It probably lacks imagination, but, well, it's always been good enough for me.
Did I hurt you?
I think I've got one or two bells that won't be the same again. The fool scrabbled through the leaf mold and finally located his hat. It clonked. Totally crushed, i'faith, he said, putting it on anyway. He seemed to feel better for that and went on. Rain, yes. Hail, yes. Even lumps of rock. Fish and small frogs, okay. Women, no, up till now. Is it going to happen again? You've got a bloody hard head, said Magrat, pulling herself to her feet. Modesty forbids me to comment, said the fool, and then remembering himself, and added quickly, Prithee.
Wow. That was a joke right there. Wow.
They stared at one another again, their minds racing. Magrat thought. Nanny said, look at him properly. I'm looking at him. He looks just the same. A sad, thin little man in a ridiculous jester's outfit. He's practically a hunchback. Then, in the same way that a few random bulges in a cloud can suddenly become a galleon or a whale in the eye of the beholder, Magrat realized that the fool was not a little man. He was at least of average height, but he made himself small by hunching his shoulders, bandying his legs, and walking in a half-crouch that made him appear as though he was capering on the spot.
Farmo says, very like a whale. Sharkies say, methinks it is backed like a weasel. Not touching that one.
I wonder what else Githa Og noticed, she thought, intrigued. He rubbed his arm and gave her a lopsided grin. I suppose you haven't got any idea where we are, he said. Witches never get lost, said Magrat firmly, although they can become temporarily mislaid. Lanker's over that way, I think. I've got to find a hill, if you'll excuse me. To see where you are? To see when, I think. There's a lot of magic going on tonight. Is there? Then I think I'll accompany you, the fool added chivalrously, after peering cautiously into the tree-haunted gloom that apparently lay between him and his flagstones. I wouldn't want anything to happen to you. Granny lay low over the broomstick as it plunged through the trackless chasms of the mountains, leaning from side to side in the hope that this might have some effect on the steering, which seemed, strangely, to be getting worse. Falling snow behind her was whipped and spiraled into odd shapes by the wind of her passage. Rearing waves of crusted snow, poised all winter over the glacial valleys, trembled, and then began the long, silent fall. Her flight was punctuated by the occasional boom of an avalanche. She looked down at a landscape of sudden death and jagged beauty, and knew it was looking back at her, as a dozing man may watch a mosquito. She wondered if it realized what she was doing. She wondered if it'd make her fall any softer, and mentally scolded herself for such softness. No, the land wasn't like that. It didn't bargain. The land gave hard and took hard. A dog always bit deepest on the veterinary hand. And then she was through, vaulting so low over the last peak that one of her boots was filled with snow, and barreling down toward the lowlands. The mist, never far away in the mountains, was back again, but this time it was making a fight of it and had become a thick silver sea in front of her. She groaned. Somewhere in the middle of it, Nanny Ogg floated, taking the occasional pull from a hip flask as a preventative against the chill. And thus it was that Granny, her hat and iron-gray hair dripping with moisture, her boots shedding lumps of ice, heard the distant and muffled sound of a voice enthusiastically explaining to the invisible sky that the hedgehog had less to worry over than just about any other mammal. Is that number 3 or number 4 time that the hedgehog song has come up in this book? Like a hawk that has spotted something small and fluffy in the grass, like a wandering interstellar flue germ that has just seen a nice blue planet drifting by, Granny turned the stick and plunged down through the choking billows. "Come on!" she screamed, drunk with speed and exhilaration, and the sound from 500 feet overhead put a passing wolf severely off its supper. "This minute, Githa Ogg!" Nanny Ogg caught her hand with considerable reluctance, and the pair of broomsticks swept up again into the clear, starlit sky. The disc, as always, gave the impression that the Creator has designed it specifically to be looked at from above. Streamers of cloud in white and silver stretched away to the rim, stirred into 1,000-mile swirls by the turning of the world. Behind the speeding brooms, the sullen roof of the fog was dragged up into a curling tunnel of white vapor, so that the watching gods, and they were certainly watching, could see the terrible flight as a furrow in the sky. 1,000 feet and rising fast into the frosty air, the two witches were bickering again. "It was a bloody stupid idea," moaned Nanny. "I never liked heights." "Did you bring something to drink?" "Certainly. You said." "Well, I drank it, didn't I?" said Nanny. "Sitting around up there at my age, Jason would have a fit." Granny gritted her teeth. "Well, let's have the power," she said. "I'm running out of up. Amazing how—" Granny's voice ended in a scream as, without any warning at all, her broomstick pinwheeled sharply across the clouds and dropped from sight. And I think that's where I'm going to stop. That's page 155, so we've read 15 pages tonight. I'm getting hungry. I've just noticed my stomach is grumbling at me. Oh, Fluff Knight's getting hungry too. Sharky say, "That's a great cliffhanger." There were some good bits in this tonight. Definitely a bit more comedy, I think, than last Friday. Sharky say, "Broom hanger." Oh, yeah, I definitely need to eat something. I am now realizing that I've eaten very little today, and I think it is my body is starting to remind me of that. Fluff Knight says, "That was a sweeping joke." Good night, everybody. See you next whatever. Bye. I'm kidding. I won't do that.
uh. With my hood over my eyes, I can't read chat. Got been a big fur there. Tears before bedtime. Fluff Knight and I worked together on... That was on Prison Break, right? I think that was on Prison Break. And there was this direct... Was that The Flash? I think that... Did you not work on Prison Break? Because I remember specifically that was definitely at Riverview. And I thought that was Prison Break because that was the show that Gordy was on as the assistant director, right? Anyways, there was this director that frequently was like, would say things like, you know, if we get this shot quickly, we need to get this shot quickly or there'll be tears before bedtime. We couldn't quite figure, I don't know, he said it, that phrase he used multiple times as if it were like a part of his vocabulary. I've never heard, I think, anybody else use that phrase. That was on a train? If it was on a train, then that was Prison Break. You only did the last 2 to 3 weeks of Prison Break, or maybe we did hear it on Prison Break and then on The Flash. Yeah, it could be. Could be that we said it a lot on The Flash. It was Mr. Harris that said it. Yeah, I don't remember his name, but I do remember what he sounded like. But I am pretty sure that it was said at Riverview when Gordy, I think Gordy's the right name, was an AD. Was first AD. Gordy, right? I don't know. It's been a little while. It's been a few years. Dash? Dash is familiar sounding. Benedict! Hey! What was that about? I think somebody was making some noise outside and Ben didn't like that. Bork! Yeah, big Bork. Ben! I shouldn't reward you for barking, but you need to come say hello to people. No, he's not interested. Yeah, that was a big Bork. Sorry about that. Well, anyways, I'm going to wrap things up. Does anybody have a suggestion for someone I should raid out to? I'm getting quite hungry. I think it's probably going to be leftovers for dinner. I've got some leftover Szechuan ribs, I think, and some cold noodles with like a beef sauce that are pretty tasty. Alright, I'm going to wrap it up. I don't think I'm going to raid tonight. But have a lovely evening, everyone. I'll be back here Friday. So we'll see you then. Have a good night. Have a good rest of the week. And yeah, stay safe. Stay happy. Bye. See you Friday.